Right. Good morning, everybody. 9:30. Let's resume. Today, we're obviously going to hear cross-examination of Mr. Pullen from the council, and then any re-examination. Can I just pause on re-examination? The last two inquiries I've done, I have totally forgotten on a couple of occasions to allow for re-examination. It's nothing personal, so if I forget, can you just wave at me? You'd think after 35 years doing this, I ought to know the order of events, but brain is clearly going. Anyway, will be some questions of Mr. Pullen and re-examination, and then we're moving on to the full-blown landscape topic and hearing from the council's witness on that, and we'll see how far we get.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So there's one procedural matter, which was yesterday. There was reference made to whether there was ever 4 phases.
Indeed,
planned.
yes.
Now, Mr. Brown has sent me a document, which is what he understands as being referred to. We're going to get a better copy of it because the version he sent me is a quite poor scanned version. So we're going to get the proper version of that. It's one of the exhibition boards from, I think, 2018 or 19. So we'll then have to make submissions on what it shows. I mean, I'm not going to get into that now, but at some point when that's available, we'll ask that to go in as an inquiry document.
Yeah, okay, that's...
You haven't seen it yet,
I haven't seen it.
No, I'll send you what Mr. Brown has sent me, but we'll get a better version anyway.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thanks for digging that out. Any other housekeeping matters?
No, so I think just to let you know that the various documents, I think kindly by the appellant, have been numbered from yesterday, the sort of new documents. I don't think they've quite arrived on the website. That'll no doubt happen today, but they have been done. They will be on the website in due course.
Yep, and obviously I'm hoping for various statements from the parties who spoke yesterday. Yeah. I've not seen any yet coming through from my office.
You mean additional ones from
the additional ones from yesterday?
No, I haven't seen ones additional ones.
We haven't either. I agree. There were a couple that were.
They'll come.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had one missing public member yesterday who was going to talk. He said he never received notice that he was going to talk, so he left at lunchtime, which is a bit sad.
Was he?
He was destined on your list. He booked himself in, Alex Price.
But he was here at the beginning.
He was here at the beginning, and he said he wasn't notified, so he went home, which is a bit strange. He just asking, is there any point of him coming back at any point?
I'm a bit surprised. I thought I was fairly clear, you know, when we started yesterday.
I know,
as to the. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not kidding at you. As to the order of events, and I mean,
I think he was expecting he notified Waverley he wanted to speak, and I think he was expecting a reply, and he didn't get one. So.
Sorry, was he on my list?
I think he was on your list, yes.
Yeah. So he was here.
He was here.
I read his name out.
He had a Cycling Federation badge on, or T-shirt on.
Well,
is there any point in coming back? Or is it worth just submitting his evidence in writing?
I think. I'll be honest. I'm not wildly sympathetic because I mean he was here. I read his name out. I said that we would start hearing from interested persons before lunch.
Yep.
And carry on after lunch, as we did. I think we had 3 people after the lunch break. Can't quite imagine why he would have disappeared. He could even have waved and said, could I go before lunch or something? I think with all that, I don't particularly want to, I mean, if it was somebody completely new who was ill yesterday, that was different. But I think for someone who was here yesterday to then go off and then want to come back, it's going to be a bit disruptive.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
So I wonder if you could ask him to submit a written statement.
Yep.
That's
okay.
The best way of doing it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Anything else from anyone? No? Okay, in that case, Mr. Cosgrove, if I can turn over to you and Mr. Pullen.
Thank you, sir. Morning, Mr. Pullen.
Good morning.
So can we just, it might be useful to have to hand the LVIA, that's the chapter 10, which is core document 2.29. So that was the chapter 10 of the environmental statement, which I think you helpfully indicated you'd read as part of your preparation along with other documents. Okay, we'll come to that in due course. I think we'll see how we go. We may need to look at the other document, but
fair enough.
And also your presentation as well. Thank you, which I think now is NID 13.2, although it hasn't made on the website, the inspector, I think, has a hard copy anyway, but thank you. So we might look at that as well. Thank you. Now, just first of all, just to identify matters in agreement. Now, as you know, and as you explained yesterday, design does not form a reason for refusal on the part of the council. And as you indicated at the time of the statement of common ground, it was hoped that the parties would be able to agree a suitable design code condition, which they now have done. And the inspector's seen the conditions as he indicated at the opening. So that's been done. Yeah. And as you said, just want to identify the purpose of the evidence then you're giving. As the statement of common ground agreed, evidence will be submitted on design matters insofar as is relevant to the respective cases on landscape.
Yes.
So insofar as there's any issue between us at all, it might relate, might it not, to what how the design evidence you give relates to landscape assessments and conclusions on landscape and visual effects.
Yes.
Which of course is not your particular area. That's going to be Mr. Smith. You're sort of giving, if I can put it this way, the contextual design background as you see it.
Yes.
Good, thank you. That's very helpful. So we won't perhaps be that long together, but I just have a few questions, if I may, just to identify some matters. Now, not I suspect at all for the inspector's benefit, but in terms of distinction between design and landscape and effects, it's well understood, isn't it, that in a case like this, and particularly in relation to the outline aspect of the scheme, matters relating to design, layout scale, landscaping are matters reserved for future consideration by virtue of conditions.
Yes.
And indeed through a design
Yes.
code condition. And whatever the view, in the end, the council contends in terms of landscape and visual effects, there will be a harmful impact. The appellant takes a slightly different view on that. But whatever the result of that debate is, what the inspector needs to be assured of is whether the scheme could be provided in a way that reflects the design, scale and density, for example, of development in the locality.
That's correct.
Yes. And design in that sense, in that limited sense, was never an issue between the council and the appellant, was it?
That's right.
Going right back to the officer report. Yeah, fine, thank you. And as you know, it's always been accepted by the council that the master plan, at least in principle, demonstrates a scheme could come forward at the reserve matter stage that would achieve a site layout and density which creates a safe, permeable and legible development.
Yes.
Never been a dispute. Good, thank you. Now, that is not to say, as I think we've agreed, that's not to say issues relating to design are unimportant in assessing landscape impacts. It's right, isn't it, as a proposition that design will need to take into account the context of the landscape and how it's been assessed and appraised.
Yes.
And that's, again, set out in Glivia. That's the sort of design section which you'll be familiar with. Now, of course, in terms of the LVIA, if we just turn that up and Sightline, the consultancy that produced this part of the environmental statement, the LVIA, and I think they had a witness, Mr. McDermott, last time, who dealt with landscape matters. But the LVI proceeded on the assumption in its conclusions and assessments that the design would be of a high quality. That's right, isn't it?
I'll take that as read because I haven't read through all the LVIA, but
Oh,
yes.
well, no, okay, that's fine. But let's just, if it assists, if we look, for example, at, and if you're doing it on PDF page numbers, it would be page 16 within the LVIA, it's paragraph 10.2.45. We've got an intricate numbering system in this chapter. So PDF page 16, 10.2.45 and 10.2.46, which is sort of halfway up that page.
Yes.
And that's, I'm going to take it slightly quickly. I think I recall you saying you have had a look at this LVIA, so I'm going to assume it's, because otherwise we'll be here all day.
No.
But there's a section headed assumptions and limitations, you'll see there. And the point there made in those two paragraphs is that Sightline Landscape, you'll see that 10.2.46 worked closely with various consultants, and towards the bottom three lines, that includes working closely with Adam Architecture, I think the architects, and refers to the integrated approach resulting in what the LVI suggests is a robust evolution of the design and assessment of effects. You see that? So, and that's as what you'd expect in any
Yes.
any scheme of this type.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Now, just while we're there, if we could also look at PDF page 39, which is 10.4 of the section 10.4, and there's a little heading 10.4 PDF page 39, inherent brackets primary mitigation through design. You see that?
Yes.
Again, can I take this as a fairly familiar part of the LVI with you? So I'll go as
Yes.
something. You tell me if I'm going too fast and missing points. But one of the many things the LVIA took into account is what it described as primary or inherent mitigation when it came to its conclusion on landscape and visual effects was design mitigation. In fact, there's quite apart from that, there's a whole lot of other factors listed at 10.4.1. You'll see it starts off, the proposed development has been designed to minimize adverse effects through the following strategies, which are considered to be primary or inherent mitigation. It lists a whole range of them. Because of time now, the one I want to particularly focus on with you is the last bullet point, which says an urban design in terms of layout, architectural character, use of materials and detailing, which is consistent with the high quality built form elements of the AONB. So, and so I suppose the question to you is, it's right, isn't it, that the fact that there was assumed to be a high quality design that would be appropriate for the AONB was inherent in the LVI assessment. In other words, it was a given.
Yes.
In coming to the conclusion, they're already baked into the overall effects as assessed by the landscape.
Yes. I mean, it's set out there.
Yeah, and that is not. I mean, it's not always the case actually, but typically, I'll put to you, it is the case that happens in terms of design. So in other words, one as a landscape designer, an outline scheme comes to a view as to landscape effects and visual effects, and in whatever methodology you choose. And you assume, for the purposes of that assessment, that it's going to be a really high quality design. You don't know exactly, and it'll be conditioned, but you make that assumption.
I think if you're working with a team, you'd like to assume it's a high quality
Yeah.
design, but
Yeah.
you can't always go in a piece of work such as this. Partly that's the part of the environmental statement that it is going to be ticking all those boxes as such.
Yes.
But one would like to think in the design team that is where it's going to wind up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that was taken into account. Now, obviously, the LVIA before this inquiry, if we look just a bit further down the next page, 1049, so 10.4.3, just to give an overview, the author says, while the inherent design mitigation substantially minimizes adverse effects, there will be some unavoidable adverse landscape and visual effects which are identified in the following section and which will require secondary mitigation to remove or reduce adverse effects. So that was the, now, Mr. Smith, I think, may take a different view. We'll come to him tomorrow. But so far as the LVIA is concerned, even allowing for what it described as mitigation, which, quote, substantially minimizes effects, there was still a conclusion, wasn't there, that there would be some unavoidable adverse landscape and visual effects as a result of the scheme.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it was not a case, at least so far as the author of this work was concerned, and the LVIA, that one, as it were, concluded on landscape effects or visual effects and then said, right, I'm going to reduce them because it's going to be a wonderful design, or mitigate it further. That was already done when you got to the conclusions. That's right, isn't it?
He'd mitigated, yes.
Yeah, fine, good. Now, we've looked at that overall conclusion just to give, again, a flavour to the inspector and to you in terms of how design fed into it. If we look at, go a bit further down into 1079 as it's numbered, which I think is PDF page 80, if you're working from that numbering system. So I'm just going to cut to the chase. There's lots of assessments then undertaken in the LVI, which are for others rather than you. But if we go to PDF page 80, number 10/79 is it? It's numbered on the bottom. There's a section headed summary. So I'm just going to go.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
All right. So there's lots of intricacy which I can perhaps talk about with other people doing the landscape, but summary. And we can see then with the design high quality baked in, there's a summary, at least so far as this author was concerned, At 10.11.4, you'll see bottom of page 10, so which line proposal has been designed to minimise adverse and effects with the following strategies, and then they're listed, and you'll see, the inspector will see that last bullet point going on to page 10.80 mentions again urban design, and particularly notes at that stage the author's view that what would be achieved would be a continuation of the architectural style consented for Scotland Park phase 1, which is a lot of the evidence you gave yesterday was explaining to the inspector the qualities of phase 1 and how that could be to some extent repeated or replicated or taken into account at least in a design of high quality on the site. Again, that's something that was baked into the findings of the LVIA, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you, that's helpful. And again, 10.11.5 on 10 solicitation, underneath that, by way of summary, as a result, the author says the adverse effects of the proposed development will be limited as follows. And then there's a summary. So there will be a moderate to large adverse effect, a significant effect on the landscape character of the northern fields in which the main urban area will be located. But these fields have a similar character and relationship with the urban area of Hazelmere as a field within Scotland Park phase 1, which is now committed. So not, again, Mr. Smith, I suspect, takes a different view, but so far as the LVIA is concerned, with all that mitigation for design baked in, there was a finding of a moderate to large adverse effect on the landscape. That's right, isn't it? As a fact, I'm not asking you to comment on the landscape finding as for others, but that is a fact, that's right.
That's a fact in regard to the northern fields, and from my experience of similar inquiries as such, is that it's that old analogy that any development in a clear field is going to have some harmful effect from what it is at present.
Yes.
I mean, I undertake TVIAs and it falls under the same rules of GLIVIA.
Yeah.
And when you have a baseline, which is a paddock with nothing in it, anything you put in there, if you follow through the GLIVIA progress is the wrong word, but the matrices will come up with an effect. And generally, if there's nothing there at the moment, it's going to be a negative and a moderate landscape. So, but I'm not giving landscape evidence.
No, I know, and I'm trying to tread carefully, but there is a little bit of an interplay, see, so I'm trying to focus on the design, but I will, and so I don't ask you to agree or disagree with the findings, just note they're there. But yes, you're right, you say a paddock, of course, what we're dealing with, we're talking about the northern fields, LCA2, they're far from just paddocks, are they? They're areas in a national landscape. And while, so one's got to bear that in mind contextually, even for a designer, hasn't one, that you're designing in a national landscape area rather than just a paddock in an undesignated area of countryside.
I appreciate that. Yes, it has that, as I think I refer to it in my evidence as the higher bar, and that's wherein one refers to the specific guidance provided by Surrey Hills AONB.
And then I think, again, with respect to you, and I tread carefully, one is then into the world of landscape and visual evidence and character assessments and how that impacts. So that's probably not for you. Good. That's 10.11.5 bullet 1 noted adverse effects. Other effects noted by the author with the design baked in, the inspector will see in those following bullet points: large adverse impact on the visual amenity of Scotland's Close. And if you go down the final bullet point under a 10.11.5 on 10/81, there'll be a large to very large adverse effect, a significant effect in ES terms, on the green enclosed character of the Midhurst Road and the visual amenity of travellers, but only for a short length, and this can be mitigated over time. There will also be an adverse effect on the visual amenity of users of the public right-of-way. So that's talking about down towards the proposed access area, isn't it? That's
right. And again, as I sort of said, from my understanding of how GLIVIA works, is that from the baseline we have, which is a very high baseline, you generally will come up with adverse effects on that. And therein, just to slightly elaborate a little bit more, is that it's where, in my assessment, and I'm not going to be speaking for Mr. Andrew Smith here, but part of what I find coming out of the guidance for the AONB, the Surrey Hills one, is that it doesn't necessarily preclude development within the landscape as such. It's just got to be of that high quality as such. So in part, I agree from a baseline where there's just absolutely nothing there. That change is going to be.
Well, I think you're right. And again, I don't think it's in dispute that good design is, is absolutely required for any development in the national landscape. I mean, it's an absolute given. I mean, a design that managed to demonstrate a good design in the national landscape is not going to stand out from anything else, because everything should have a good design in the national landscape. Not a particular marker out, is it, in that sense? Okay. So there we are. There's a various adverse findings despite land design being considered. Now, overall view then, 10.11.12, if you just pan down to that a couple of page or two further down, 1082, it's concluded, the LVIA, that the only significant adverse effect that will arise due to the proposed event will on the landscape character of the northern fields, which will change to a residential townscape, 22% of the site by area. And I think that's referring to, isn't it, what we now know is LCA 1 and 2.
Yes.
Includes the access about I think 5 hectares or so in terms of size of the land.
Sorry, it says on that first one, it says the northern fields.
Yes.
Yes.
But the only reason I say that is because when it then says 22% of site by area in brackets, I think we established elsewhere that 22% is the figure that includes LCA 1 and 2. And so I think it's probably referring to that area. But if you think I'm wrong, someone can tell me if I'm wrong.
I'll do that to Mr. Smith because
Yeah,
he
fine.
knows it.
Absolutely
far
fine.
more.
Okay. I may be wrong on that. I assume that was, I think at this stage we hadn't divided into LCA 1s and 2. That was something done
Fair
for
enough.
the first inquiry. So okay, good. All right, thank you. Now, just to conclude on the LVIA, if one just goes down a little bit further to yeah, okay. Now deal with it this way. What was done last time by Mr. Smith, and in fact is done in the LVIA, is what's called secondary mitigation, as it's put. We've looked at what's inherent mitigation, which includes design. There was then a process of secondary mitigation in which at the last inquiry, the landscape evidence looked into other benefits from elsewhere on the site that might be landscape benefits and sought to net that off to any harm that had been found in the initial area. And that led to the overall findings last time. So anyway, that's for others, not to you, those assessments. But for my purposes, I think we're agreed, aren't we, as a proposition that the LVIA work took into account the existence of and assumed there would be a high quality of design in its assessments and findings.
Yes.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Now, again, as you know, the council, to that extent, always accepted the position of high quality design. I think you quoted in your presentation and in your proof from part of the council's closings last time, different advocate from me, but the closings that were produced on behalf of the council last time, you quote for the inspector's notice on page 15 of your proof. I don't think we need to turn it up, but it was accepted by the council as it is now that the scheme would be capable of meeting the design policies, for example, TD1. It's not a policy that's said to be conflicted with when understood in the context of design. And that was accepted by the council. And what was said in closings, as you quoted in your proof last time, it said, in any event, as Mr. Collins accepted at the last inquiry, policy TD1, which was the design policy, requires high quality design, and policy P3 of the management plan is to the same effect. Therefore, good design is a minimum requirement and would not, quote, mark the scheme out in any way. And as a proposition, that's not in dispute, is it?
I think that I think I probably had it in my presentation.
You
as
did,
such,
you did.
But I do find the wording of the not mark the scheme out in any way implies a degree of ordinariness about it. And there's nothing particularly special about it as such. And I think in this context of the AONB, for a scheme to be, and I think it probably goes on to where we may be heading, not entirely sure, but I think that in itself, if in that context is fine, I agree with that. But I would suggest that in my understanding of how the design works within its landscape, and that there is no issue in design against this high bar, which I come out through my report. And I think partly why I'm giving evidence in the landscape setting is that it would mark the scheme out. It is a particularly well-designed scheme as such.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, what I'm putting to you then, perhaps we are in disagreement. What I'm putting to you is the proposition the council made last time, really, that because good design, by which we mean high quality design, is something that's required, particularly in a national landscape. Arguably policy anywhere, but particularly in the national landscape, it's something that's just you've got to do. And because of that, the fact, and let's assume, as everyone has done, that this scheme can deliver a high quality design, it's not going to particularly mark it out in any way when one understands the context within which it's proposed to develop it. That's the proposition. Do you agree with that? Or
I agree with that. I think if I can qualify it, it's where I come onto with in my evidence as such, is that it should, in terms of determining the weight of the scheme, which is for Mr. Collins, but not in the sense of teeing him up as such, but I always look at when I'm running these. This is one of those inquiries I've done where I've looked through similar issues and there's no issue with design. And normally I'm expecting to find issues of, even if it's worded in terms of character, which relates to the built form character, but there's none of that. And then it takes me to the framework paragraph 139, which is that significant weight should be given to development which reflects local design policies and so on. And this is one of those unusual circumstances I found myself in, that the scheme as agreed between ourselves has met all those policies, and it's not just the local plan policies that you've been we've been taken to in that closing, but they're in the underlying AONB policies on design as such. So when coming back to your original point on that closing, when it said it does not mark out the scheme in any particular way, is the point where I think that perhaps it should.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think maybe if there is any difference between us, it's really to do with the context, because what I'm really putting to you is that in the context of a national landscape where there are particular requirements for any scheme to have good design, the fact that one delivers it is not particularly unusual or out of the ordinary. And I think that's the point. Maybe there's not a lot between us, but again, the proposition is really good design is an inherent requirement in the context of this site because it's in a national landscape.
Yes,
That's really our, okay. Thank you. Now, and yeah, fine. Thank you. Now, so far as if we just take up your proof, now you tell us on page 5 of your proof, para 111, when you're setting out your qualification experience, that your evidence is confined to design related matters. And for that reason, this isn't a criticism of you, it's just really I suspect, inevitable. You don't, for example, particularly analyse all the context relating to landscape character, qualities, and so forth, do you, in your evidence? That's something Mr. Smith does, in terms of what might be the characteristics of accessibility or tranquility or whatever. As we've discussed, these things are to some extent relevant to design, and there's an interplay, but that's not your evidence to do that, and indeed you don't do that.
No, I pick up on. I think I pick up on dark skies. I think it's one of the ones I generally pick up on.
I mean, and so far as there are a couple of areas, and I would perhaps come to them where you do, and I understand why you sort of tiptoe and tread the water into landscape character and context, with which I don't think we agree with your propositions. But so far as you do cover those issues, I'm really going to cover them with a different witness. I hope that's just clear with you. I'll flag up where I think they are.
Yes,
but there's only so far I can take them, I think, with you. Now, you don't, for example, the inspector's got a statutory duty to grapple with in Section 85, furthering the purposes of conserving natural beauty and so forth. Again, that's something that's relevant to context and how one might design and assess in terms of landscape, but not something you grapple with in your proof. That's, again, I think Mr. Collins deals with that issue.
Mr. Collins and Mr. Smith.
Fine,
yes.
good.
I think I'm passing a lot of them.
No,
their
this is
way.
excellent. We can all agree to put it off to someone else and we'll be over in 5 minutes. It'll be fantastic. Well, okay, if I do that with every witness and then run out the door, it should work very well. Again, forgive me for being, you do quite fairly set out a number of development plan policies in your section 4. I don't think you go on necessarily in your proof to analyse them and determine conflicts and so forth, but you set out a range of policies. Again, I'm going to deal with policies and whether there's conflict in light of the evidence, probably with Mr. Collins, rather than address them with you.
Yeah.
I hope that's fair. Again, I know you set them all out, but I'm not going to go through RE3 and so forth with you, some of which I think relate to matters beyond your direct evidence anyway. Does that make sense to you at least?
Yes, it's great to be in the design witness sometimes.
Very good. Now, so when I read your evidence, I understand what you're really saying, if one sums it up, is that if the impacts on landscape character and visual effects can be overcome, that brackets being an issue for Mr. Smith and others, there's a dispute. But assuming that side of the argument goes in favour of your client, which is hotly disputed by the council, you say that in that event, design can be secured in a way that will ensure it's of high quality and will be of high quality in context.
I think I say that design's of high quality.
Yes.
As to, this all comes back to the balance, the scales, so to effect. So assuming that there is harm on the landscape in the overall balance, and this is partly treading into Mr. Collins, and I always quite enjoy trying to avoid putting weight on policies as such because it makes the planning witness's work a little bit easier. But in terms of the balance, looking at design and in particular how, as an urban designer, we're very much aware of landscape, of course. I look at that quality first. As to the effects of the landscape and whether there's harm or not, ultimately that's going to be a balancing exercise further down the line.
I understand. So it's me probably being it clear. I'd actually put it on assuming the landscape effects could be overcome for the purposes of my question, actually. But because we know, well, assuming the appellant's right on landscape effects, and Petra is wrong, the council is wrong, really the bag of your evidence is to say that design can be secured in a way that's of high quality. Even if the council's right in terms of the seriousness of the adverse landscape effects, your evidence is still, well, okay, but design can be secured of a high quality. Inspector, you should know that. That's really your evidence. And the reason I put you down on that, the inspector will obviously have to come to do with balance and benefits, but in this particular case, the way the appellant's done it in the landscape and visual impact assessment, and in fact the way Mr. Petra has assessed it, is to assume in their exercise that the design will be of a high quality. That's baked in before they come to their conclusions.
Yes, I mean,
So, is that as you understand
yes,
it as well?
it's again, as it comes in, the scheme hasn't changed since this, and then I've assessed it, so it's still the same height.
But so as you understand your client's case, let us say, for example, Mr. Smith, I don't think he does, but let's say he found a high level of harm to the landscape character. From a design point of view, we wouldn't then say, well, but the design's so good, doesn't matter, because in coming to that conclusion, if he did, he would have already baked in good design. We've seen from the methodology. That's assumed in coming to his conclusion. Yeah.
Yes, but it comes into that balance.
Well, all right. Now, just turn up the previous inspector's decision, if you would, which is NID 3.8. Do you have that? I'll let you get there, so it's NID 3.8, and when you're there, I'm working from a hard copy. Can I get you to turn to paragraph 121? Again, I hope not unfairly. I know you've read this decision. I know everyone here's inspector's read it, so I'm going to just cut to particular points rather than contextually going through it all.
Yes.
So this is a part of the inspector's decision where he's dealing with landscape and visual effects. And so I'm just going to cut to as well, I think the design point at 121. He says, moreover, as Mr. Chris McDermott's brief puts it, there is a conscious choice to create quote, the perception of an entrance to a country estate is referring to the Midhurst Road access. Setting aside the intrinsic design merits of that element of the scheme, and then footnote 83, noting in footnote 83 that the council alleges no conflict in respect of the design of that element or the potential design of the scheme as a whole, with reference to LPP policy TD1 Townscape and Design. And then he goes on to say, with that footnote, in landscape and visual terms, the intensity of the built development around the site access would be clearly a toll to the natural and scenic beauty. As with accessibility or recreation, the scheme again appears consciously premised on altering character. Now, again, I'm not concerned about the character, but the point really was the previous inspector, so far as in due course this inspector looks at that and treats it as a material consideration, which is an issue of dispute. But the previous inspector understood this distinction, didn't he, that you and I have agreed on as between design and landscape character and impact when finding as he did.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, I don't know whether your view in this, it's a peripherally designed thing, but you remember yesterday referred to an email from Mr. Brown, who's the Surrey Hills Board planning advisor, which the inspector asked to become a document, and I think it is becoming one. It was an email from him in March sent to the inspectorate. Mr. Smith, even, sorry. Mr. Smith, Mr. Brown, sorry. Generic names, I'm being very rude. Mr. Smith. With Mr. Brown. Anyway, sorry, is that something familiar to
It's
you?
not familiar to
No,
me.
fine, okay. Let me just put this, one of the proposition he makes, see if you can help with this, was that the...
Sorry, can you just pause for a second whilst I turn it up?
Thank you. I don't know what number to give you to get to the witness yet, but if I just read out, there's one proposition when the inspector's got it, and if you want to look, one of the points he made was he said the scale of this proposed development is the largest ever proposed across the entire Surrey Hills A1B landscape. A1B in my 16 years in this part-time role, following my retirement to head of planning at Mull District Council, also a constituent. So really, it's really a proposition he puts forward about this being very large scheme in context, or in fact that he thinks the largest ever within those parameters. Your views on that? Is he right to characterise it that way in terms of size?
I think, in my view, no.
Right.
I think in a crude sense, if one looks at numbers, it depends how you want to define scale, but in a very crude sense, if one looks at numbers, one might argue that 130 new dwellings is significant in a town of Hazelmere, but if one looks at it as that is only 20% of the overall site and the amount of landscape proposed, then your measure of scale changes.
Right.
And then further, if one looks at I always find scale one of those tricky things to quantify, because it means so much to so many different people, whether one's talking about one single very large building on the site or lots of small ones. And then, of course, how and whom would perceive that scale, because it's all very well looking at a layout and street plans, but for the greater part, one wouldn't perceive 100 and so dwellings. So I disagree with that. Numerically, it might well be so.
Yes, that was really my point. I understand your. I think, and maybe you don't know, but I think his point is a relative one to what's been developed in his experience elsewhere in this national landscape.
I mean, one can look at that two ways: either that Hazelmere or Waverley as a borough as a whole has not been delivering houses such so anything over 50 is of great scale.
Yes.
So,
but fine. But so far as that factually puts forward, that are you in a position to dispute that in the sense I think that he means it compared with?
I'm not in a position to dispute that. No.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Now, again, if we look at your proof, section 3, at 3.10. You've got this is under the heading surrounding context, and you do make 3.10.11 is under the heading Midhurst Road. Now, your evidence there, and I understand why it's not a criticism, but that is really dealing with landscape character issues, isn't it?
It's well, this is factual context. So if I'm again, it comes out in the design access statement, but it is dealing with landscape character, and in some part,
Yeah.
If, as a designer, and I'm looking at to describe spaces, Midhurst Road clearly has that character, and it's the trees, so I qualify by what it is.
Yes, what I'm, let me put it to you this way. I mean, I've got lots of questions to Mr. Smith about the character of Midhurst Road and relating it to particular features in various landscape assessment studies. And I think there's an issue between us and how one characterises it, but I don't want to necessarily go through them all with you unless I have to. But the point I was really putting to you is that so far as that's dealing with landscape character, other witnesses are dealing with that in more detail, aren't they?
Yes.
Because
yes.
you haven't gone through, and again, I didn't criticise it for you, but particular landscape character assessments and picked out bits that may or may not be relevant to the inspector, or done a landscape character assessment
No.
of any of the parts of the site, let alone Midhurst Road.
No, I haven't.
So, I mean, I could, therefore, while I could take issue with what you say, I don't think I'm going to necessarily drill down to the detail with you, because I'll deal with that with others. All right. But just at a higher level then, without going into all the documents and looking at the character assessments and so forth, do you accept from a design point of view that the character of the road that has been described as a sunken road that goes along where the access is going to be heading up towards Hazelmere or heading out of Hazelmere is of a different character in terms of just it being a part of the national landscape that's green and open, compared with Hazelmere and Scotland's Close, where it's built up and developed?
It is different, yes.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah,
it's, again,
Okay.
just to qualify, it's partly why I encourage the inspector to
Yes.
take the wider site visit to see all of Midhurst
Absolutely.
Road.
Great.
Because my experience of coming into Hazelmere is that it's a busy arterial road, and you go whizzing up it, and before you know it, you're in suburbia, and
Yeah.
then you're in the centre of Hazelmere.
Yeah.
And it's, you would appreciate it if you're walking, but it's different experiences. And
Yeah.
again, that's Mr. Smith will pick that up.
Fine. And again, I don't want to duplicate, but again, it is, again, if you were coming out of Hazelmere, a lot of residents have said, this is really the first, this is when you begin to appreciate the countryside as you're coming out. This part of the national landscape is there, it's undeveloped. Got many of the characteristics of the national landscape. That's where you really first appreciate it.
I think
There's a change.
I think I agree. You get the change of suburbia coming out, but you still see dwellings. And as you come down to the bottom at Belvale Lane, you're back into a little bit of suburbia again before you come out into the countryside.
But that bit then, when you're coming out of Hazelmere or you're approaching it, is distinct and rural in character from what one finds in Hazelmere, isn't it?
I wouldn't call it rural, because,
Right.
but then I'm an urban designer. My definition of rural is I'm generally thinking of pastoral fields going out into the distance, but it's woodland. It's coming down out of the suburban area, but then you come into a bit more suburban at the bottom end when you pass the town sign. So, but it has a character of it. Yes, it does.
Now that the premise of the scheme, I mean, certainly so far as the northern bits where the major part of the development's going, but also in relation to the LCA western parts where the access is supposed to come in. And if we just turn up, actually, while we're just discussing this bit, your very helpful presentation yesterday, which is now NID 13.2, is just going to save me you've got on page 15 of it, you've got the sort of plan view of the access area with the going up that
Yes.
well. So page 15 is your numbered in the back of the presentation. So that sort of area. The premise of the scheme is that it will change. The character will change. It will be replaced by something of a different character.
Yes, Midhurst Road will change, but it'll be a character which is not unfamiliar.
Right. Yes. Okay. Take that in stages. And we can go to relevant parts of the LVI if we need to pin this point down. But I don't think your client saying that could have said, might have argued, actually what will exist when all that's built out is of a very similar character. It's just going to change a bit. They're not saying that.
No.
They're accepting it will be a different character.
Yes.
I think the appellant's position is that in design terms, it will be something that you will see elsewhere in the national landscape of the lodge.
Yes.
That maybe is the difference between us. In design terms, you accept it'll be different, it'll be new, but it'll be, you say, appropriate too.
Yes.
Does that really work in terms of design? I mean, if you put it this way, if you've got an area of undeveloped natural landscape that has particular qualities, for the sake of argument, that are representative of a natural landscape key characteristics, and you replace it with something else, a new character, even if, for the sake of argument, which the council doesn't accept, but even if that you could find that character elsewhere in the natural landscape, it doesn't make it appropriate, does it?
I disagree in that the new implies it's something unfamiliar. Well, road junction's familiar. The white lining on the road junction is white lining on a road junction, and you'll find junctions further along Midhurst Road to the bottom and to the top. I mean, different degrees of white lining as such. I think it is a change, and again, in terms of the change of character, it is a change from a road which has no junctions off it at the moment at that stretch, but at either end, of course, it does. It's a road with many junctions along it, but it's that particular stretch will have a junction in it. But I don't think it's anything.
Well, okay, again, just have a look at your page 15, and again, I will go through character issues in more detail, Mr. Smith, but just physically from a design point of view, we can see, I think it's the red dotted demarcations where trees are going to be removed. I think I've understood that key correctly. It's tree removal, isn't it?
Yes.
The existing trees to be removed. The inspector gets an idea there. You've got the new access road, which from a construction and design point of view is quite a major engineering operation, isn't it? In terms of when the inspector goes on the site, we'll see the existing levels and grading of the land. It's quite an extensive amount of engineering work that will be required to produce that.
There is, and it's inevitability of any access is that you'll have, for safety reasons and sightlines, etc., is that there will be a degree of works.
Yes, and so I think for example, the retaining wall, can't remember offhand how long that is. We can just get it off. It's 30, 40 meters, maybe something like that.
Yes.
It is needed partly because of the slope of the land there.
Yes.
That's a requirement of it. We've got the car park, the lodge, the walking shelter, and then as the road, which is the principal vehicle access to the development up on the ridge, is a substantial engineering operation that's going to be required to develop that road out, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, we'll look at that. Some of the AVRs, which I'll look at with Mr. Smith and others, don't criticise them from the views they're taking. You don't necessarily see all the car park and things. They're taken from a different angle. But there is going to be plainly in design terms a major change from what exists in this part of the site at the moment, isn't there?
In plan form, yes, and it comes back to my point I gave in the presentation that the experience will change from certain view angles, and I accept that. But the thing with a plan is that until you actually, and so you'll walk the site and you'll be able to appreciate yourself from the footpath that's existing, the extent to which you'll appreciate the change. And just returning back to your point on the significant engineering works, yes, they are significant, but as a point of design, having worked on schemes where I too had to grapple with engineering and contours, is that this could have been alternately a much more engineered road with a footpath along it, much straighter as such, but rather we've gone for this sinuous, typical type rural driveway with a separated cycle path, as I set in Chief. So it is a design, I accept it's over-engineered perhaps, or sorry, very significantly engineered, not over-engineered, but significantly engineered. But if that gets the quality of design that one is after, then I think that's acceptable.
Okay, I see. Well, that perhaps gives us some parameters of debate with others. Just for the inspector's note, perhaps just for you, in fairness to you, if we go in the LVIA again at 10-75, which is PDF page.
Sorry, I just closed that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. To be fair, I did tell you we'd finished with it, but just
CD.
CD 2.29.
2.29.
Yes, sorry. It was so it's in PDF 75, page number 10-75 at the bottom, and it's 10.8.8. it's this.
This one that opens up.
Hang on.
Yeah, this-
I have also closed it.
yeah, you see, here we are. Never trust a barrister when it says put the document away.
Okay, I'm with you.
Thank you. It's just really to, this is under a little heading residual effects. This is not the immediate, this is
Yes.
not longer term or the landscape character of the site. And 10.8.7, Professor will have a large adverse landscape character. We've talked about that. And just 10.8.8, just to pin this character, slight reference to design. So the character of the field through which the proposed access road will build will change from a simple pasture field. So that's how it's characterised at the moment. You agree with that as part of pasture field? To that of the character of the entrance to a country estate or country park. But since the new landscape will be of high quality, and that's the design point, in keeping with similar landscapes found in the OB, the effect is neutral, or at worst, slight adverse due to the new access Belmouth and Ryland Lane. So that's the view. There's a dispute between us whether that is, but that's the logic underpinning the design. It's going to be a new character replacing that. Fine. Good. And then at just 10.54, 10.54, which you'll just have to pan down a bit, just looking at give you the reference to that. 10.5.58 is what I'd like you to find within which is on page, I've got it, 1053. Sorry.
Yes.
Just check I've given you the right reference. Everyone else is. Sorry. My IT going brilliantly wrong. Do you have 10.5.58? Getting there. Thank you. Yes, my notes to myself were not even close to being correct on that one. 10.5.58. Yes, thank you. This is assessment of effects. So this is the effects in terms of landscape completion at year one. Magnitude of change will be high, resulting in a very potentially large adverse impact. But the aim is to replace the high quality aggregate landscape with a high quality estate landscape. So those are the point I suppose I'm really going back to. Those are the adverse effects found, again, taking account into design and the change of character as part of that assessment.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. Now, get back into your proof quickly. 3.31, page 22. You're making at 3.31 against a number of points about the access, referring to Midhurst Road requiring some widening. You refer to the present woodland context, which will be largely retained, so forth. And then you take a view that what will exist will be, in your view, not inconsistent with the immediate context of the site, to the immediate north of the site. Again, I think that's, I don't criticise, that's straying slightly into landscape character matters, isn't it? To the extent it is, in any event, we don't agree with that, and I'll pick that up with Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I just wanted to make it clear. I didn't want that to be left unchallenged because you've said it, but I understand why. Good, thank you. Again, just your views, take up the previous inspector's decision again, NID 3.8. This time, could you go to, because I think similar arguments obviously were before him. And this time it's at 122. So we looked at 121 a moment ago. And his take in light of the similar debate last time was that by consequence of the proposal would, in my view, fundamentally and seriously adverse affect landscape and visual character here, which presently contributes towards the landscape and scenic beauty of the AONB. There are, as above, various moderating factors, nonetheless, particularly as regards the implications to Midhurst Road, footpath 597 and LCA1, the effect of the scheme may fairly be termed significantly adverse, reducing only slightly from that gradation over time. Now, again, those are findings for others, but as you understood it, the last inquiry, and as we've agreed here, in those assessments, before the inspector design was baked in.
Yes,
Yeah. So the inspector, as we've seen in various notes, was assuming a high design then when he came to those conclusions, wasn't he? As you understand it?
as I understand it,
Yeah.
they were in,
All right.
yes.
Good, thank you. Good. Final part of my questions to you, really, just section 5 of your proof, similar points, I think. That you made before section 5, in particular 5.1.6. Again, you're making various points about the landform of the site supporting the location of built development behind the ridge line and so forth. I think actually, if one's being fair, that the access road comes down below the ridge line as well, doesn't it?
As it does, yes.
Yes, so it's not, you say only the Scout Lodge and the school will be located south. I think the matters we've just been looking at would also be located south as it happens, but no particular point on that, just to be accurate.
I'm talking about built development, but
Yeah.
yes, roads are built developments.
Yeah, well, Lodge House and yeah, etc. All right. And then you make the point I'm really putting to you here is again, there's some further points about character, really, as I understand it, particularly when one looks at the section and 5.1.11. You say landscape context would change, but it remains a landscape dominant scene and familiar to Hazelmere. We obviously disagree with that. You know, that's part of our case in disagreeing with that. Again, it seems to me to slightly cross over into landscape character assessment issues rather than pure design. To the extent that you put it in your proof, I want to make it clear we don't agree with that proposition. I think I'm going to address the detail of that with Mr. Smith.
Okay.
Again, so forgive me for sounding like a broken record. I just want to make it clear that I'm not leaving parts unchallenged. Okay, thank you. Good, thank you. Good. I think with that said, and those demarcations clear between us, those are my questions. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Any re-examination?
Yes, a few things. Mr. Pullen, you were asked some questions about the ES chapter that deals with landscape. So that's CD 2.29. Can you just get that up for a moment? And obviously there was a series of questions about good design being baked into the assessment. And at one point in the course of the questions, you referred to the two northern fields, LCA1 and LCA2, as being paddocks. Do you recall that?
I do, yes.
And obviously I don't think that's controversial in itself, but I think it was then put to you that, well, they're not just paddocks, these are areas of land in the AONB, and therefore that's something you must have regard to in designing a scheme. One of the documents that you assess compliance with in your proof is what we call the SHEDG, which is the Surrey Hills Environmental Design Guide.
Yes.
Now that's covered in your proof, isn't it, at paragraph 4.34 onwards. Can I just ask you, first of all, how important or otherwise is that document in terms of looking at design quality in an AONB?
I think that's particularly significant, sir, in that I have worked with other AONB areas, and the general purpose of these design guides as such is that they recognise that development within the AONB does happen. There is, the AONB washes over built areas as much as it is over landscape areas as such. And therein, it understands, these are the documents that one goes to as a designer if one's understanding how to work within that landscape setting. And so I think they're particularly important.
Now, obviously, you were instructed in advance of this appeal. You weren't instructed previously. In terms of a detailed analysis of design, where is the most relevant information in terms of detailed design analysis? Which document do we go to that does?
So it would be the design and access statement.
Design and access
and the
statement.
addendum to that as well.
Yeah. And in terms of proofs, what would it would be whose proof?
It would be my proof for that.
So, I mean, if one compares the consideration of design in the landscape and visual chapter with, for example, your proof, which one has the greater consideration of design?
It'll be mine.
Right. You can do a word search if you like on the chapter 10 of the landscape and visual assessment. Does that consider the SHEDG?
I could probably do the word search, but it's just, oh, here we go. I will be robust to say, because I haven't, and it's not going to be the one I want.
It certainly considers the management plan, but if you can see, does it consider the SHEDG that you've focused on?
No, it does not.
No. Okay, thank you. Now, in addition, you were asked some questions shortly after that about, well, you've got to expect that all design in an AONB is going to be good design. So, you know, that's the kind of starting point. Can I ask you to go in your proof, please, first of all, to paragraph 1.20 and 1.21 of your proof, where you're setting out your previous experience. Sorry, it's paragraph, just give me one moment. Yes, it's 1.20 and 1.21 on page 6. So you're dealing here in terms of your relevant experience with the Turndon pulled in application. And as you explained there, that's a called in decision which was granted by the Secretary of State in November of last year for a scheme in the national landscape, in a national landscape, or an AONB as it was previously, in Turndon. You were a witness at that inquiry, that's why you're referring to it.
Yes.
Could we just look at, if you go over to paragraph 1.20 and 1.21, you'll see that you've set out, haven't you, the paragraphs of the Secretary of State that deal with design in that case. So you'll see that the Minister refers to the situation being neutral on design. And then you'll see, for example, paragraph 28 that you quote, the Secretary of State has concerns about the layout and design of the proposal, particularly the sensitivity and appropriateness of the design in the context of its setting, etc. But taken into account that only 20% of the site will be built on and the proposed development would deliver landscape enhancements, overall she considers the design of the scheme is a neutral factor in this case. So, I mean, first of all, in your view, I mean, obviously there the Secretary of State grants despite design being neutral. In your view, is the design position positive, neutral or negative in this case?
In this case, for this appeal, it's positive.
Yeah.
In that there are no design objections, but it's not enough just to say design objections. It's design objections in regard to the MPPF, the AONB. The Turndon inquiry had design objections. And indeed, as I set out at my para 1.17, the inspector's report found favourable with my analysis at paragraph 723 and rejected the criticisms that were raised at that inquiry. I mean, one of them being the inquiry was regarded as having a generic layout as such. So you'll find from the DAS that the appellant's architects team have gone to considerable lengths in ensuring that this layout isn't generic, or if it is generic, it's generic to exact those features of the AONB environmental design guide that should be expected within the AONB.
And at 1.21, you say pertinent to this evidence, i.e. you mean the evidence for this inquiry, in common with Turndon, the scheme at Scotland Park occupies circa a fifth of the overall site, 22%. Why is that important in relation to your reliance on Turndon here?
Again, it's that of the overall scheme, a fifth of it was just the built development as such, so the roads and the houses as such. The rest of it was landscape.
Okay. Now, you were asked some questions about Mr. Smith, not our Mr. Smith, but Mr. Smith, who has made a representation for the Surrey board, the AOMB board, about his email of the 11th of March, where he makes the claim that this scheme would be the largest scheme ever granted in this national landscape. Now, I didn't get the chance to cross-examine him on that but bold assertion, but could we look at the evidence to see whether he's actually right about that? So can we first of all please go to Mr. Collins' proof? Have you got Mr. Collins' proof available?
CD.
That is NID 5.1.
Thank you. Yes.
If you go to 3.16, this is a decision we'll be hearing a lot more about when we look at the planning evidence, but 3.16, I believe there are a number of similarities between land at Sturt Farm near Hazelmere for 135 dwellings in the appeal proposal, comparable site-specific circumstances such as scale and location in the national landscape. But there are also comparable planning circumstances that have arguably become more acute since the approval of Sturt Farm. So Sturt Farm, 135 units, smaller or bigger than this scheme?
That's bigger.
Thank you. And then in addition, please, we've heard a lot about the Royal School, which is obviously an allocated site subject to a planning application, but must still satisfy the major development test. Could you look at Mr. Collins' proof again, this time at paragraph 7.11? Um, 7.11. Natural England's consultee response to the Royal School application for 99 dwellings and 11 apartments. So that's 110 units.
That's larger.
Well, I don't think it's large. I think we're 111, aren't we, in total? So it's one different. Okay, thank you. That probably deals with Mr. Smith. I would have put some more questions to him if he'd come along, but he didn't. Now, you were asked some questions about the difference between Hazelmere as a town and how it appears and the Midhurst Road. And in the course of that questioning, there were a number of things were put to you about what Midhurst Road was like, but one of the things that Mr. Cosgrove put to you was that it was sunken lane in character. Now, I don't think you got a chance to come back to that point specifically, and I was going to ask you, could you look at Mr. Smith's proof, please? So Mr. Smith's proof, which I think is NID 5.3, and go to his page 16. And you'll see he says at 3.57, the A286 is a busy road. I think that reflects your answer when you said it was an arterial road. It runs through Hazelmere to the north, links to the A287 to the south, in essence wrapping around the urban fringe of Hazelmere. While further to the northeast, to the northwest periphery of the appeal site, the road may be more sunken, the environs of the entrance is not, and it is certainly not deeply incised, overtly rural single-track sunken lane. In this location, the land falls away to the northwestern side of Midhurst Road, and on that side of the road, the land gently rises up to Red Court Woods. And then you'll see that Mr. Smith produced some photographs of what he regards as sunken lanes, contrasting that with what one sees near the site. So can I just have your view, because it was put to you amongst a number of other things. Are we looking at a sunken lane near the access to this site?
No.
Okay, thank you. Now, you were then asked some questions about the entrance, and I need you to look at two things. Page 15 of your presentation, which you were taken to. And I'm also going to ask you to look at Mr. Smith's proof again. So first of all, you were asked some questions about the retaining wall. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And the nature of that as an engineering operation. Can I ask you, we can see the retaining wall shown on the plan that you've got at your page 15, but could we just look at what Mr. Smith says about that in his proof at page 20, his proof? So 4.12 Roman 1, Midhurst Road access. The arrival priority junction designed in accordance with the Highway Authority's requirements leads to a new designed landscape. Arrival into the scheme is announced through the placing of the lodge, and then the space also facilitates improved recreational access through the walker's bothy, itself an attractive feature, and then integrated into the retaining wall, a wall that's been reduced in height in response to officer comments, and an element constructed of local bargate stone. So in design terms, given its height, its positioning and the materials used, what do you say about the wall in design terms?
Again, it's well designed, it's local materials, high quality materials, it's stone. And this is partly why the DS addendum is quite important, because it picked up, which I didn't pick up in responding to questions as such, but that wall was reduced in height by 0.5 metre.
Mm-hmm. And if we then look at, again, at page 15 of your presentation, in terms of the features that you were sort of taken through that one can see here, if we look at the diverted footpath, which is obviously on the other side of the new planting towards the road, if you just look at the key for that, I think what that is showing are little sort of grey circles, correct? Is that right? Little grey circles, do you see that?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. And that, what does that show in the key if they're little grey circles?
So it's a mown path, so it's a naturally worn surface. So it's equivalent to probably what is there now.
Okay. And then if you, in relation again to this, Mr. Cosgrove mentioned to you that we have some AVRs of these locations in Mr. Smith's proof. Could I just ask you to look at those briefly in relation to this? So it's Mr. Smith's proof again, please. And if you go to pages 60 and 61 to start with. So this is an image which in which we see, don't we, the lodge, we see the access road going in, we see the footpath, and we see some of the road inside the site, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. How would you describe this scene? Would you say, how would you describe this scene in terms of whether it's something that's characteristic or not of the national landscape?
Well, I would say this is characteristic of that in the sense of the quality, the design of the building as such, and the landscapes that around. I picked up in my evidence, but it's particularly in the design and access statement, the fence boundary treatment, the planting. One still sees the landscape around the lodge. So I would think it's consistent with that.
Yeah. And in terms of the lodge, I mean, I think on your next page, what are you showing there in relation to characteristics of the national landscape relative to this scheme? So it's page 16 of your.
Sorry, yes. So you can see there's figure 27. We've got Alderbrook Park Lodge again, distinctive building. This one has walled boundaries as such, but one can see the landscape around it. It's, again, these are all taken from the design and access statement, and it demonstrates to me that the architects in coming up with the scheme were very much mindful of that AONB landscape setting, the guidance within it, and then went and applied that guidance to the layout of the buildings and the spaces, the scheme essentially.
Mm-hmm. And then I think if we just leave your page 16 open, where you're showing the Red Lodge, Red Court, You can see the road going in, you can see the lodge house. If you then go to Mr. Smith's proof, pages 66 to 67, how does what we're showing there compare, in your view, to something like the Lodge Red Court?
It is very similar, and deliberately so, in that the architects have quite clearly taken the sort of the wider setting of the site in its context with Red Court and applied a similar design aesthetic to their proposed building.
Yeah. I mean, obviously this is a winter view, but even in a winter view, how significant is the infrastructure of the road in your view from this perspective?
Well, it's in my view, it's not significant. It's, in a sense, any white lining on a major carriageway going into an urban area is going to have some degree of control on it, and for sensible reasons. I think the ghost lane is far more satisfactory than a mini roundabout, which is clearly, from my experience of similar issues, an urbanizing influence. Whereas a widening of the road with some white lining to demarcate the turning point, and bearing in mind that this is a small part of an otherwise much longer road as such, I think, and there's other junctions as long as I said in response to questions.
Yeah,
I don't think that's dominant at all.
Okay, and then I think two final things. So you were taken a couple of times to the ES chapter towards the end of your cross-examination. So this is again CD 2.29, and I wonder if we can go back to a couple of the paragraphs that you were asked to go to. So one of them was 10.8.8.
I've just got to jump back to that one.
Yeah, which is on page 1075.
Try and open it on another document.
So your page 1075, paragraph 10.8.8. You found that, Mr. Blair?
I'm just having to go onto my other, just been locked out of the Box website. Probably a small glitch.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. Page.
Page 1075.
Thank you.
And at 10.8.8, I think you were taken to this paragraph in particular. The character of the field through which the proposed access will be built will change from a simple pasture field to have character of a country estate. But since the new landscape will be high quality and in keeping with similar landscapes found within the A and B, the effect is neutral once quality largely green landscape replaced by another, or at worse, slightly worse, due to the access bell mouth and the right turn lane. But if you look at the two paragraphs that follow, it's then said the landscape character of the southern fields will change, that there will be benefits from various landscape enhancement. And if you go over to 10.8.10, the resulting changes to landscape character are all considered to be in keeping with the landscape types. If all these effects are taken as a whole, the overall effect of the landscape character is neutral, as the adverse effects arising from the proposed urban area is offset by the beneficial enhancements to the remaining woods and fields which form the larger proportion of the site. Now, I wondered, just have your view, how does that fit with what you've told us about the Turndon decision in your view?
Again, that is, it's very I mean, in a sense, that's very similar in that this overall effect is of the development and it is considered neutral.
And then if we go to page 1053, which you were taken to as well, 1053, and I think you were taken to 10.5.59. This is under the heading Midhurst Road as it draws level with the proposed right-hand turn lane. And you'll see 10.5.58 says the magnitude of change will be high, but then 10.5.59 says additional landscaping throughout this field is proposed. Once established in the medium term, this will re-establish a green edge and enclosed character to the road while maintaining glimpse view of the attractive landscape beyond. The residual effects once proposed mitigation is established will be of adverse or slight significance, primarily due to the increase in the highway infrastructure forming the junction. I mean, some of that is landscape, but from a design perspective, do you have any comment on that?
In a sense, it's literally saying that the adverse effects are going to be that white lining as such and as a part of the junction, but that on balance with all the landscaping that comes with it, what we're left with is, in a sense, that part of the highways work which facilitates accessing and safe access.
And then can I ask you then finally, you were asked to go to the inspector's decision from the last time we did this appeal. So I wonder if you could go back to that, please. And that is NID 3.8. And it's you were taken to paragraphs 121 and 122 on electronic page 22. So let me know when you found those.
So I have to go and reload. I think I've just dropped out of the. Slight technical issue with the core docs.
Okay. Shall I just read them out? Yeah. So if you remember, this was you were read paragraphs 121 and 122. And if I just read those out briefly, moreover, as Christopher McDermott's proof puts it, there's a conscious choice to create the perception of an entrance to a country estate. Setting aside the intrinsic design merits of that element of the scheme, in landscape and visual terms, the intensity of built development around the site access would be clearly at odds with natural and scenic beauty. As with accessibility or recreation, the scheme again appears consciously premised on altering character. And then 122, by consequence, the proposal would, in my view, fundamentally and seriously affect the landscape and visual character here. Now, before the inspector says those things, at 120, which you weren't taken to, he says at the end of 120, as reasoned above, the AOMB was designated as regards natural beauty rather than for its built environment. And can I just have your view on that, please? Lodges, like at Red Court, which is what the inspector's referring to here, he says architecturally it bears much similarity to lodge formerly associated with Red Court. Can you tell me whether you agree with the inspector, whether it's right that he's saying that only natural features and not built environment can be part of the natural beauty of the AOMB?
I would disagree, and that's from my understanding of reading through the environmental design guide. Indeed, there's pictures of this picturesque landscape, which is within Mr. Smith's evidence as well, which is very much that built form is also part of this beautiful landscape.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much. Let me catch up. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I can't actually remember if I said in my opening comments that I tend to interject whenever, frankly, whenever it suits me. So don't wait for inspectors' questions at the end. I tend to interject if and when necessary, but obviously hasn't been necessary to date. Anyway, that very helpfully concludes that session. It's 5 to 11. Let's resume, please, at 11:15 when we're moving on to the council's first witness. So 15:15, please. Thanks, all. And don't forget your. Right, it's about 11:15. Let's resume. Just so parties know, I have had but not digested an email from the representative of the Scout group who appeared yesterday. He's attached various documents that he had referred to, just to clarify which documents they are. As I say, I've received that, but I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. So, with that aside, Mr. Cosgrove.
You were ahead of us. I think I haven't certainly seen it yet. And so can I reserve my position and I don't know what they are, but I do.
Oh, okay.
But thank you, sir. I mean, it may be that it's come to the council in some form and it hasn't made it to
It
me.
literally pinged into my inbox
Right.
about 10 minutes ago, so it's probably taking a while to come through. but yeah,
When I get to my planning witness next week, we can cover that off if we need to.
As I understand it, he has just sent documents that are already in the core documents, i.e. all the Scout reps that I identified yesterday, yes. I mean, I haven't seen it myself, but I understand that's what it is.
okay.
So, I mean, we should cross-check it, but as I understand it, they're all,
He did indeed refer to a number of documents, and I think I said it would be helpful if,
Yeah.
I was a little confused as to which was which.
yes.
And I think that's probably trying to clarify it, but we can have a
Yeah,
look at
we'll
that.
have a look and see, but I think that's what it is.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Mr. Cosgrove, over to you for your witness.
Yes, thank you, sir.
I think you were thinking about an hour and a half.
Yeah, no, I hope a lot less actually.
Yeah, okay.
But,
And then we'll take a break whenever that is.
Yeah.
For a lunch break, and I imagine there are quite a few questions of this witness which we'll look at this afternoon. So over to you.
Yes, thank you, sir. So, Mr. Petro, can I introduce you to the inquiry from your main proof? Section 1, you're Robert Petro, you're a chartered landscape architect and the managing director of Petro Harley Limited. If that's right. And you've been instructed to present evidence. You also appeared at the previous inquiry last year, presenting evidence on landscape matters in that inquiry too. Is that right? Thank you. And as you set out in section 1 in your proof at 1.5, you've got 30 years or over 30 years experience in landscape design, starting as a landscape foreman for Squires Landscape before becoming a landscape manager at Fulham Place. Then you set out your further experience extensive since then, and you established Petro Harley in 2011, and you're now managing director. Thank you. And at 1.7, you've indicated you've obviously visited the site and you've carried out your evidence in accordance with the Landscape Institute's Code of Standards of Conduct and Practice, and you've confirmed your opinions are your true and professional opinions. Correct. All that right. Good. Thank you. I want to be as efficient as possible because the inspector's given a clear indication he's read all the proofs. The crowds appear to have deserted me today. No one's really here. There may be some people online, but let's try and be as efficient as we can in achieving the inspector's, as he has done a lot of reading. So can we just start by getting up the landscape statement of common ground, which is NID 4.10. And we'll have that to hand. Just before we look at that, in terms of just standing back for a minute, the approach and method you've adopted to assessing matters, which you've described in section 3 on the methodology, is that, as you understand it, broadly similar to the method undertaken by the LVIA and indeed Mr. Smith in terms of a sort of GLIVIA compliant approach? Although there may be some difference in terminology, there's a broadly similar approach.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, with the statement of common ground for landscape matters, can we just look at section 2, just to set the scene for those listening? There's quite a lot of agreed matters. It's agreed, we see at 2.1, to matters about the baseline. At 2.2 and 2.3, there's references to 2 studies which have been addressed in evidence. The Surrey County Council exercise, the Hankinson Duckett Associates at 2.2, and then at 2.3, there's reference to the Waverley Borough Council landscape study, August 2014, and you've read and considered both of those in your evidence and assessment. Is that right?
I have.
It's also set out at 2.4 what you and your predecessor and indeed Mr. Smith have done, which is agreed that the site can be divided into a number of landscape character units, which the inspector will be familiar with, numbered 1 through to 7. I think Mr. Smith's broken down 1 into 2 parts, but that's the agreed parameters set out there. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you. And 2628, just to get the overview at the start, position which is agreed is that there will be adverse landscape effects post-construction with mitigation are limited to areas 1 and 2.
That's correct.
Beneficial changes to other parts of the land. There might be some differences between you, which we'll look at between you as to the extent of them. And it's agreed there's no impact suggested on the setting of the South Downs National Park.
Correct.
Yep, good. So that's just some background character. Similar exercise at section 3. There's also some points made about visual receptors and some of the underlying work which the inspector has. Good. Now, with that in mind, can we then just first of all look at some of the landscape character matters by way of site context? Now, I don't want to go into all the particular studies because no doubt Ms. Marici can do that if he wants to, and I can do it with Mr. Smith, and inspectors we know looked at them. But can you just by way of overview give the inspector your view, please, in terms of landscape character as to particular points you would wish him to have in mind when considering the character of the site as part of the national landscape or otherwise? Key features you think are relevant for the inspector to have in mind, please.
It's given that the appeal site lies within the national landscape. I think the key points an inspector ought to have in his mind is it's an undeveloped area of land of high quality and scenic value. It abuts the edge of the settlement and creates a clear break between the national landscape and the settlement. I think it's important that there's a clear demarcation between the national landscape and the edge of Hindhead. And this site is important in that respect. It provides an open area of high quality landscape of high value within the national landscape itself. And it conforms pretty much well to the Surrey Landscape Character Assessment in that it's an area of woodland, small pastoral fields, moderate tranquility, but it's undoubtedly an attractive scenic landscape that hasn't become degraded through other land uses. High quality, a good representation of the Surrey Hills landscape and all its very special qualities.
Thank you. Couple of points, just picking up on some recent evidence we've heard from the design witness. There was a little debate a moment ago about sunken lanes and reference to sunken lanes and some of the character assessments documents. What's your view on that issue, and how relevant is the sunken lane issue as a character issue for this case?
My view, it's highly relevant. You certainly get an appreciation moving to and from Haslemere of a very rural road. It's a busy road, but it's rural in its characteristics.
This is the Midhurst Road we're talking about.
Midhurst Road, beg your pardon. Lined with mature trees, has a rural character and quality that is quite representative of the sunken lanes within the national landscape.
One point which is relevant to character, which is picked up in evidence, is this issue of accessibility and the extent to which accessibility or lack of accessibility is a character issue so far as this site is concerned, and the site as a part of the national landscape. What's your view on that, please, as an issue?
It's accepted within the character assessment that this part of the national landscape isn't particularly accessible via public rights of ways. So that's part of its character. It doesn't mean it's got any less value. It just so happens that there aren't many public footpaths, bridleways, boats within this part of the national landscape.
Yeah. Now, can we turn up the previous inspector's decision, please, which is NID 3.8, which we'll be dipping into occasionally. So have it to hand if you would. And again, as I did with the last witness, I'm going to assume, because I know it's to be true, the inspector's read it all, so we can just cut to the particular points I'm going to take you to, I hope not unfairly. Can you look within that document at paragraph 78 of the, which is page 15 of the inspector's decision, paragraph 78, that under a heading relevant landscape studies. See that?
Just scrolling through.
That's all right, you take your time.
I'm with you.
Now, in that section, and really I'm focusing now with you on paragraph 78 through to 82, just over the page, but the inspector makes a number of points about the national landscape. In paragraph 78, his first point is that it inevitably encompasses various settlements and buildings. It was nonetheless, he says, established for the purposes of conserving and enhancing, quote, natural beauty, a point to which I return. Your view on that proposition and statement by the previous inspector, please. What do you think of it?
He's referring to natural beauty, I believe, as opposed to scenic beauty. In this case, I believe he's referring to natural beauty as to an undeveloped landscape, so landscape without built form.
We'll come on later on when we look at effects, but one of the issues you've heard the debate about is, less so, I think it's not really an issue in terms of the housing, but the access, Midhurst Road access and the infrastructure relating to it. I think the appellant accepts it will constitute a change of character, but its position set out in various documents is that the character they're proposing to create is not unacceptable. Indeed, it can be found elsewhere in the national landscape and therefore is, in that sense, appropriate. I'm sure I don't put it as eloquently as it will be put in due course, but what do you think of that proposition?
I disagree with that, but it comes back to this idea of natural beauty. And that particular field, and the inspector may have seen it already and was going to be walking the site. The character and the important part of the scenic and natural beauty of that particular field is that it's undeveloped.
Yes.
It's a field that is down to permanent pasture. It doesn't have any man-made features within that field itself. And that is what I think the inspector referring to here about its natural beauty. It's undeveloped rural nature of high scenic value and quality.
And to what extent does this site, any or all of it or parts of it, contribute to those matters identified? Those issues?
Very, very, very highly. It is a very attractive, actually quite a beautiful landscape, and its beauty is in its undeveloped form.
Now, para 79 of the inspector's decision refers to the management plan and the statement of significance, particularly within it, and quotes from some of it relating to the landscape mosaic. This is the statement of significance of the management plan. We can go to it if we need be, but it's a useful point of reference. The landscape mosaic of farmland, woodland, heaths, downs and commons has inspired some of the country's greatest artists, writers and architects over the centuries. We heard a little bit about that yesterday from members of the public. And there's reference to Sir Robert Hunter, again, who we heard about yesterday in some detail. Again, what do you say, particularly from your point of view, about that reference in the management plan to a mosaic of farmland, woodland, heaths, downs and commons and so forth? How relevant is that to this side?
It's very relevant. The red line, the appeal site, is indeed a mosaic of landscape, of pasture and woodlands and the landform. It's a reasonably complex landscape, and it's that interplay between the different elements, the different natural elements that give rise to its high quality and value.
Yes. Paragraph 80, there's reference again to key features of the national landscape as including woodland, country lanes, farmland, parkland and tranquility. And then there's also reference to sunken lanes being mentioned in the management plan with some paragraph references in the footnote. There are a number of places in the management plan where you can see reference to that. Just, you mentioned sunken lanes already. Tranquility, how should the inspector, in your view, grapple with that issue in relation to this site and what's proposed?
The edges of the site, the tranquility is somewhat compromised by the presence of the road and by the housing. But nevertheless, within the main part of the site, I find tranquility to be quite high. You're not aware of traffic movement, noise, or other built form. So my view would be there's a high level of tranquility within the site, main site itself.
Thank you. Then 81, there's reference to GALD and factors relating to natural beauty. We'll pass over that for the moment. Can we just go on to paragraph 82? There's reference then to the Surrey Landscape Character Assessment, various points of reference in relation to the landscape character type GW5, which we looked at in the Statement of Common Ground, and the reference to the characterisation of that area being a complex and heavily wooded topography dotted with small-scale fields, often pastoral, with occasional expansive views from higher ground. And then there's reference to the site also forming part of HE05A of the 2014 study. Again, what points do you draw from those studies that are of relevance in landscape terms to the inspector?
I think what's important to the inspector here is that the appeal site conforms pretty much exactly to the points the inspector is drawing out here. It's characterised by our complex or heavily wooded topography. We have the woodlands within the site and dotted with small scale fields, often pastoral. It's tick, tick, tick. Complies very strongly with this assessment. And then occasional expansive views from higher ground. There is an expansive view from LC2 over the settlement towards the distant field. So it's pretty much exactly what is being described here.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, next little topic we can move on is under the sort of subheading value/susceptibility and sensitivity. In other words, the well-trodden constituent parts that landscape exercises often use to.
Are we finished with this document? Or are we still on this document?
Which the inspector's decision,
Okay.
we'll be coming back to that, so keep it to hand. But can I, for present purposes, ask you to turn up your proof, page 11, and there's table 3 under paragraph 4.4 in your proof, and you've tell us there that that's your assessment, and in the table you address issues of value, susceptibility, which gives us a sensitivity, and then you make various notes about the sightline assessment, that's the LVIA. Now, Mr. Smith, if it's possible to keep 2 documents open in the world of IT, I don't know, but in Mr. Smith's proof, he has a table 5, which is on his page 35, which is headed Summary Landscape Attributes and Effects.
I'm having trouble opening that document on this. Not letting me do it.
Right. Well, we better resolve that one because can you open it?
Hang on.
Have you got a spare copy of this?
It won't let me do it.
Well, I'm going to have to get you to see the appellant's landscape proof and see if we've got a copy we can pass up.
Oh, hang on, let me do it again. Date of reference, please.
So I'm asking you to look at page 35 of Mr. Smith's proof, which is table 5.
Could you give me the NID?
Yes, I can. It's Mr. Smith's proof is NID 5.3.
Okay,
5.3.
right. Part 1.
I think probably it's page 35, probably part 1. Thank you. Well, that's very kind. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
It's opening, it's right.
Should we, I'll take you up on your offer anyway, just as a backup, if I may, just to keep things moving.
Just in case.
If that's very kind, Mr. Smith, thank you very much. So do you have?
I have a digital copy and a hard copy.
Right, great. So thank you. So really the point, I don't want to take too long on this, but there are, as the inspector will have seen, there are a number of differences. Mr. Smith's table has in some cases said not apparent for your susceptibility findings. So far as
Can you take me to the page number, please?
page 35, table 5.
Thank you.
So the inspector can see what susceptibility you have from your proof, which for present purposes for LCA 1 and 2, all high susceptibility. But what I would just want to delve in with you, having got that evidence out now, when the inspector compares your evidence with Mr. Smith's in relation to issues of value and susceptibility, which are, as we know, inputs into a finding of sensitivity, why we have the differences as far as you're concerned. So if we look at LCA 1, the top northern field part, the difference here, I think, lies in the value that you've both accorded it. You give it a high value. This is the top part of LCA 1, and Mr. Smith gives that a medium. So again, can you assist why you think there's that difference, and if so, who you think's right?
I mean, it's going to be a question for Mr. Smith to explain why he thinks it's medium. Why I think it's high is because it accords, as I said before, almost exactly with the landscape character assessment. It's a small scale, undeveloped field that abuts the settlement. It has all the characters and qualities that we expect to see in this particular part of the national landscape. And so my view is it's got to be high.
Yeah.
It's not degraded. There's no land management that somehow brought that quality, that value down a notch from storage, horticulture, or something else. It's an attractive, small-scale pastoral field that accords almost exactly with the landscape character assessment. My view has got to be high.
Yeah, and just drop down, maybe a similar point. If you look at the LCA 2 Northern Field assessment of value, that's also Mr. Smith gives a medium and you give a high. Maybe a similar debate to be had there. But just let me ask you this point, which the appellants mentioned contextually, perhaps, maybe it's relevant to this, that you've got existing development next to the northern part of the site. You've got what's called phase 1 now, I think, in Scotland Close, or it's got another name, is being built out near completion, the inspector will have seen. It might be said, well, that's some of the immediate context which perhaps brings the value down, because you've got development. What do you say to that point in terms of landscape character?
I understand the argument, but the fact remains that both LCA 1 and 2 are high quality, undeveloped land. They don't exhibit any urban fringe characteristics. I mean, it's not unusual where land abuts a settlement to see sort of urban fringe creeping in with the land use activities, garages, storage, all those sort of things that contribute to an urban fringe feel. We're certainly aware of the settlement edge, but the settlement edge, the influence it exerts within this particular area of valued landscape isn't there. They are highly attractive, undeveloped, well-managed areas of land, and they form a particularly important function, providing this clean break, an edge between the national landscape and the adjacent settlement.
Yeah.
So my view that there hasn't been kind of an encroachment from that settlement within these fields. They remain high quality, undeveloped pastoral land without any urban fringe influences. So my view is they remain high rather than medium.
Good, thank you. And just so far as susceptibility is concerned, the difference appears to be in relation to LCA 1 bottom part. Mr. Smith assesses susceptibility as being medium. You say high.
Yes.
Again, what is the?
I don't think we're disagreeing. I think we're both saying susceptibility is high, aren't we?
No, I think on the LCA bottom.
Oh, sorry, I'm the wrong.
So that's the area with the
column,
access
yes.
for the Midhurst Road.
Yes.
There's a difference, I think.
Yeah.
He says
So
medium.
I'm saying susceptibility is high. It's a measure of how that landscape is going to respond to the development proposed. I think susceptibility, due to it being a national landscape, high quality, undeveloped land, the susceptibility, in my view, has to be high.
Yeah, okay. Now, actually, I mean, in the end, one can get very excited about these things. The sensitivity, which is the the result of value and susceptibility, I think in
Yeah.
all your methodologies, one can see for LCA 1 and 2, you agree, apart from LCA 1 bottom, which Mr. Smith says is high to medium, as opposed to just high, all the rest of them are agreed to be high in terms of sensitivity, I think. So,
I think we're largely agreeing.
yeah, okay, all right. And then the inspector will know, but for any members of the public that may be listening, sensitivity is then taken to the magnitude of effect normally to give a judgment as to effects. Year 1 effects, residual, what do you understand residual mean? I think in your proof you've assessed it at year 10 plus. What do you understand? Is there any difference between you on residual, what that means?
I don't think so. I think what Mr. Smith is doing here, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll be corrected. There's a year 1 effect that's immediately post construction, and residual effect is after a period of time. That's usually between 10 or 15 years. So what is the effect once the scheme's had a chance to kind of bed in, landscape proposals, establish, grow, etc., etc. So it's what's left over after the development's completed and been landscaped and has grown and has the mitigation has achieved its desired effects.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the sort of tabular exercise. Now, to try and draw it together in chief, sensitivity is often, isn't it, formed by those judgments and relates to some of the matters we looked at earlier of landscape character and the particular qualities. Could you take the inspector's decision to hand again, the previous inspector's decision, NID 3.8? Keep those tables. We're going to come back to the tables, so don't discard them entirely. But I just want to touch base on the inspector's decision. Paragraph 83. Heading landscape sensitivity. Now, just for those interested to give context, paragraph, and we won't go through them in any detail, paragraphs 83.
You're going to have to tell me the reference again, so I have to close
So,
them
no,
down and come back.
not all, NID 3.8.
With you.
You got it?
Yeah.
We're in page 16 of that decision, paragraph 83, under a heading landscape sensitivity.
With you.
And the inspector, that's, I mean, largely looking at obviously similar evidence, talks about landscape value, divergences between the site and characteristics. Now, 83, 84, 85, and 86, he picks out some particular points, as it were, about the character, which might not be plus points, particular points about power lines and infrastructure and some man-made intervention. So he goes through that. And then if you go, he goes to 87 and refers to the Midhurst Road being part of an arterial route, and so forth. And he says that those factors he's mentioned above in those paragraphs are relevant to landscape value and susceptibility. And again, just pausing there in principle, do you agree that those matters he set out at 83 to 86 and 87 are relevant to landscape?
I agree with the inspector, yes.
Now, what he then goes on to do, you'll see he's teased it up at the bottom of paragraph 87. He says the factors above are relevant to landscape value and susceptibility. Nonetheless, for 10 principal reasons, I do not consider they're particularly meaningful. And then he lists them at 10 matters. Now, again, I don't want to bore the inspector by going through them all, but your view on those 10 principal reasons the inspector gives, please. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think he's got it wrong? What's your
I agree.
view? Thank you. And again, I can look at some of those with Mr. Smith if I need to, but those are all reasons the inspector gives, going through to paragraph 99, I think, of his decision before he moves on to visual sensitivity, which we'll come back to. Now, in terms of effects, so go back to Mr. Smith's table on page 35, which I think you've got in hard copy. And we've got there, helpfully, I think, an accurate summary of the differences in terms of effects in landscape terms at year 1 and the residual effects, which we'll take to mean 10 years and beyond, shall we, for present purposes. Now, there are differences throughout. So I'm going to focus, first of all, on LCA 1 and LCA 2. And we can see that in terms of LCA 1, let's start with at the top northern field, Year one, Mr. Smith agrees or says large to moderate adverse, you say substantial adverse. He then residual effect is moderate to slight, and you say substantial adverse. Now, so there's quite a difference between you, particularly at the residual stage. What do you say about that difference, and what do you understand the reason for it to be?
My view here is here we're talking about the area of housing, 110 odd units. The question is that the construction imposition of three-dimensional new housing units within the receiving landscape, we accept has an adverse landscape effect. To take it further forward is, can that effect be reduced by mitigation? In my view, there might be some reduction, but I don't think the reduction would be as great as Mr. Smith is suggesting, is that the housing is still there, they are permanent, they will always be there for the duration of the life of the scheme. That adverse effect cannot be mitigated to the extent that's being suggested.
I think you were here just in terms of design. I put to an earlier witness that it appeared from the LVIA that design was, as it were, to some extent baked into the assessment.
Sure.
What's your approach when you come to conclusions and your evidence on landscape effects or visual effects in terms of design? What have you taken into account, particularly in relation to outline elements?
That's considered as a part of the assessment. It was, I considered and I accept that any development within the national landscape is going to have to be high quality and be guided by the Surrey Hills management plan. So I'm taking into account a high quality design and still coming to the same conclusion that the adverse effects are high.
Now, when the inspector looks at the other differences between you, there's again a difference in terms of LCA2, the northern field, so that's part of the housing development as well. Again, similar, you say substantial adverse throughout. Mr. Smith says large to moderate, then reduces to moderate to slight. So is that really the same debate about the housing element of the scheme? In terms of the bottom western field, so that's the access area, includes other parts as well, LCA1 bottom. Large difference between you, because at year one, as it were, when the access is completed and so forth, Mr. Smith says slight adverse, which is in his world not material really for a decision maker. You say substantial adverse, and similar difference residual stage. So what again, matters of judgment, of course, but what do you understand the difference to be in terms of judgments there from a landscape character effect?
My view, it comes back to the same issue about what is the receiving landscape's baseline. And I think we're both saying it's a high quality, high susceptibility, high sensitivity. I don't believe that the construction of the road, the car park, retaining wall, regrading, other engineering features are in keeping with this receiving landscape.
Yeah.
And my view is, yes, there is some mitigation and that's good, but nevertheless, there is a whole scale change from an open, undeveloped, highly attractive landscape into a new access road with all these other engineering features.
Yeah.
My view that there's got to be an adverse change. That adverse change will remain, but it might be slightly reduced by mitigation. That adverse change would remain throughout the life of the scheme.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to go to, in relation to other areas, other LCAs, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, there's the table helpfully sets out differences between you. In some instances, actually, for example, LCA 4, you assess year one effect as beneficial, whereas Mr. Smith's saying adverse. So there are in some instances where you're giving more weight than he is to effects. But is there anything you want to say about those other areas and in terms of the benefits that are or the work that's proposed there?
I think what the inspector has to consider, and it's always a matter of judgment, is whether or not the beneficial changes to the remaining landscape character units, are they big enough and great enough to offset the adverse changes to LC A1 and 2? And I think the inspector needs to consider maybe 2 points here. One is that the improvements to the landscape areas 3 to 7 are generally confined to an area of landscape that's of a high quality anyway. We're not taking a landscape that's become degraded and doesn't conform to the Surrey character assessment. They're already good quality areas of landscape that contribute greatly to the national landscape. There are beneficial changes, but the beneficial changes on top of the baseline are relatively slight. So that's the first issue. The second issue is I consider there are adverse changes to LCA 1 and 2. I consider adverse changes to be high and cannot be mitigated. So the question to the inspector is, are the slight beneficial changes to LCA 3 to 7 of big enough magnitude and quality and substance to offset the negative changes in the rest of the area?
Thank you. And again, just on that benefits point, previous inspector's decision again, please, 3.8, NID 3.8.
I have it.
Paragraph 111, which is on page 20, and
Yeah.
it says the appellant advances what might be characterised as various landscape benefits. Much of the site would be opened up as a public and community resource. Better reveal the Second World War spigot, if I pronounce that correctly.
Yeah, it is.
Spigot gun, whatever that is. And would entail significant tree planting, management of invasive species, woodland management, and the creation of a richer habitat throughout the site. And then he sets out 5 principal reasons where he takes the view, as he says, that the proposed benefits would, I'm not of the view that the proposed benefits would significantly reduce or mitigate landscape and visual effects in this specific instance. So he appears to form a similar view to you, but I just wanted to understand what you think of the reasoning that he sets out, though. Again, we don't need to go through them all in detail, but just so the inspector understands what you think of his logic and reasoning in relation to the paragraphs that follow.
I agree with the inspector's analysis and the conclusions he's coming to. I mean, yes, there's a community benefit in having more access to this landscape, and that's a good thing. But it doesn't really do anything about improving landscape character and quality. It's about public appreciation.
Yeah.
The Second World War spigot gun, but I still can't find it. I've seen the site 3 times. I still can't actually find the site of it, but that's neither here nor there. It's a minor benefit. So what he's saying really, I think, is that the benefits are relatively minor, and they don't go far enough to offset the negative changes to LCA 1 and 2. And I agree with him.
Now, there are some, I think, updated AVRs. It might, if we turn up Mr. Smith's proof of evidence, please. That's of course you've got a hard copy, fantastic. And there are some AVRs within his appendices. So I'm going to ask you to look at some of those. Sorry, that's.
I thought someone was having a terrible.
Stomach incident somewhere. Let me just do this so I'm not. Page 60.
Not making a dog to blame, is there? Which is a shame.
61. We'll just touch base with a few of these. While we've got,
Page number, please.
yeah, 61. So we're in the appendices. It's 61 numbered bottom right hand corner, page 8 within the appendices, I think. Inspector has it. See if you. So it's looking towards the proposed, looking south-ish towards the proposed lodge.
Yep.
House. We've heard a lot about lodges and how appropriate they are. what's your view in terms of landscape character and particularly with the national landscape, how appropriate that might be as a view in the national landscape and how that plays in this case?
It's accepted that built form is a feature of the national landscape. Clearly it is. But it's comparing and contrasting that to the baseline. And that here we see the road widened, the white lines, the new built form. New built form is attractive and well designed. I accept that. But nevertheless, it's introducing new built form, new features, new engineered features into a highly scenic and varied landscape.
Yeah. Now, just go on a couple of pages to what is page 60. Page 64 and 65. So it's view two existing. I think he's looking broadly northwards up the Midhurst Road. You have that?
Page 64.
I think so. My page number's gone on the copying, but it's view two existing. And then the next page, which I have got numbered, page 65, is a picture of a tree along the road. And then if you go on to compare with view two proposed estimated 10-year growth, the proposed vegetation and so forth, which I think is page 66.
Yep.
So that's a sort of before and after in terms of the AVR. Yep. And what are the points you would wish to draw out in terms of landscape character or indeed visual effects for?
I think it's both. I think the important thing to appreciate with the page 66, it's too rude. It's a fairly kind view of the proposals. Might be more interested in seeing a view where the lady is standing, where you'd see the view of the new wide road entrance and the traffic and the movements. But nevertheless, we're seeing new built form, which we accept is well designed and attractive in its own right. But importantly, we're seeing engineering works to widen the road, and in particular, the new access road winds way up towards the north of the site. So we're seeing a lot more built form, hard engineering features within what is an existing open pastoral field, highly attractive and conforms very highly to the special qualities of the national landscape. We're seeing a whole-scale change from scenic, attractive landscape to a designed, engineered landscape.
Now, if we go on a couple of pages to view three, this is on page 68 or internal page for the appendices 12. It's headed view three, Western Meadow looking northeast. And this is a part of the site. We can see here the road, which the previous inspector, I think, referred to as the sunken road, and you've said that as well in your evidence. Well, that bit of landscape we see there.
So you're page 60,
sorry,
68.
68, view three, Western Meadow looking northeast. It's also page 12 in the blue numbering. That's the one. Yep. The inspector will, in due course, have the chance to walk through. I mean, it's been on the road, obviously, but to actually walk through that part of the site and the relating woodland on the site visit. But because you're not going to be telling him or giving him any evidence on the site visit, Mr. Petro, what do you want to say about the character and quality of that particular part of the site in terms of the matters we've talked about?
Well, this is the part of the site we're concerned about, where the new lodge, road, car park, bothy, etc. is going to be. And I invite the inspector to look at this photograph and to appreciate the natural and scenic beauty of this field. Highly attractive, an important part of the national landscape, and how that's going to be changed with the new road, the retaining wall, earthworks, all the other engineering features we've been discussing, and how that is, in my view, a negative change, an adverse change to the scenic landscape.
And just to look at that in form, go on a couple of pages. You've got page 71. You've got a sort of focused in bit of that view, and then over the page, 2 pages on 73, you've got a view with, where you can see at least, I don't think that view shows you the car park and other bits, but you can still see some of the
Sure.
access road. And what do you say about that change, comparing and contrasting what was there before in terms of
I'm
the?
largely going to repeat myself, trying not to, about what these changes are. It's obviously man-made, obviously engineered, and in my view, if you compare 71 with 73, there's an adverse change in terms of landscape character and quality. And in particular, there's a existing public footpath that runs along the road, so it's visible from not only from passing motorists, but also from people using the public footpaths.
Yeah. Now you've set out, I'm going to spend less time with you because I think it's really a matter for the inspector on site, particularly about visual impacts, but just for the inspector's notes, your table, in your proof, there's a table, and also Mr. Smith's proof on page 37, there's a similar table to the landscape one dealing with visual attributes and effects, setting out the differences as between you and him. There are a number of concerns you set out, a particular concern from the local authority about the public right of way running along.
Which table?
So Mr. Smith's table 6, page 37. It's headed summary visual attributes and effects, and he's helpfully put out the different effects at year 1 and residual as between you and him. Yeah. So again, Inspector will have seen there are differences, particularly if one looks at the towards the bottom of the public footpath along Midhurst, towards the bottom of the table. You'll all agree on sensitivity. His assessment, year 1 effect, moderate to slight, whereas you have substantial and then slight adverse to negligible, and you have a moderate residual.
Yes.
So again, a large difference between the two of you in terms of your judgment. And again, maybe does this relate to the similar debate we're having about what do you think it relates to? What underpins that difference in visual terms?
I think what underpins the difference is, my view is that an attractive view from the public footpath of an undeveloped scenic landscape is replaced by a road, a building, and the other features discussed before. My view is that's got to be an adverse change, and a high adverse change. Mr. Smith, I think, and Troy's going to explain it later on, is advancing the idea that that would be replaced by a well-designed landscape, and that's how he gets to a reduction from slight adverse to negligible. I just don't agree with that assessment. I think you've got to contrast and compare the scenic, undeveloped nature of the existing view and replacement by, yes, with a design landscape, but design landscape that is clearly man-made and doesn't respond, in my view, to the special qualities of the national landscape in this area.
And again, just to touch base with the inspector's decision of 3.8, again, previous inspector's decision, could we go to page 22 of that paragraph 120, please?
22.
Page 22, paragraph 120 of the decision.
I'm with you.
So this is picking up really on the debate we've been having. He refers in 120 to the, he says, line 3, I acknowledge the gatehouse would emulate gatehouses found throughout the area, national landscapes, and now is. Architecturally, it bears much similarity with the lodge formerly associated with Rick Court. However, I question the use of the word landscape in that LVI phrase. As reasoned in paragraph 8 above, the area of outstanding natural beauty was designated as regards natural beauty rather than for its built environment, point I've asked you about already. Then he goes on to the 121, which we've looked at, about the conscious choice to change the character. And then 122, sort of summing it up, both in relation to landscape and visual matters, the inspector says the proposal would, in my view, fundamentally and seriously adversely affect landscape and visual character here, which presently contributes towards the landscape and scenic beauty of the OMB. There are moderating factors nonetheless, particularly as regards the implications for Midhurst Road, footpath 597 and LCA 1. The effect of the scheme may be fairly termed significantly adverse, reducing only slightly from that gradation over time. Then he talks about cumulative matters as well. Again, any difference between you and the previous inspector in terms
No,
of?
no, I agree with his assessment and conclusions. And really what he's saying here is that, you know, what is important within the national landscape is its scenic beauty, and its scenic beauty derives from its undeveloped form, the appreciation of an undeveloped, highly attractive scenic landscape. And if that were replaced with an obviously man-made engineered landscape, he considers that that is less attractive, less appealing than the undeveloped landscape. So he's making the distinction between undeveloped, scenic and designed landscape. And his view is that the existing scenic landscape is of a higher quality and value than the replacement design landscape.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, just one final matter. You deal with, mentioned some development policies. Are you leaving Mr. Johnson to deal with the policy application and conflict issues?
It's a planning matter, and
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it's best dealt with a planner. I will comment if you want me to, but I think it's a planning matter.
And then just, I think one final point for me in your proof of evidence, page 24 of your proof. You mention in relation to the alternative site assessment exercise, which is, I think, is a joy for next week, largely. You mentioned that Mr. Johnson's proof contains the assessment, but you've contributed to an assessment at high level of landscape effects. Just to be here, what did your contribution consist of?
That was predominantly a desktop exercise, looking at the local plan, aerial photographs and designation, and coming to a fairly high level assessment of what the likely effects will be.
Thank you. Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Petro. Those are my questions in chief, sir. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Just after 12 o'clock, let's resume at 1, please.
No, I know the rules. I will disappear and have a sandwich and stuff.
Justify that in terms not to have the brush of the sea. Yeah. Progressive, give us a possibility of fully understood that. Yeah, probably. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so we might get to it first thing tomorrow. Yeah, fair enough. Right, that's right. Well, yes, let's get really brief. Yes, yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Well, yes. You can't say it's a potential family. It's just to confirm your name. It's now very nice. It's nice and that dungeon. Do you know what? I expect you're pretty. Yeah, so just the car. No, it's fine. Well, sitting in the line before we go. No, we're sort of on the way out. That's where we wanted to be.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Just tell them everything like that.
No, of course. Yeah, before we go start really good.
No, we can pause it. Okay, so you now